Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for our webinar sharing insights from our latest payer-provider convergence research. This webinar will focus on the new solutions being developed to simplify and automate the prior authorization process, traditionally a source of significant friction between providers and payers. This report was released today and can be found on our report's sales page. You can also download the slides from the handout section and feel free to submit questions throughout the webinar in the question dialog. For those of you watching the recording, the link for the slides will be in the video description. Our team here at Chilmark Research is united by the belief that effective deployment and use of IT is essential to modernizing care delivery and ultimately improving the patient journey to health. Understanding the emerging trends and technologies to enable this is what drives our choice of research topics each year. It is our goal to provide objective, forward-thinking insights that will help create an informed market of stakeholders that can truly impact our care delivery system. Today's speaker is Jennifer Rogers, who covers the PHM and provider-payer convergence domains for us. Jennifer joined us last year after leaving Optum, and she has been a great addition to our team. She started her career on the front lines as an RN in surgical intensive care and has since worked across the continuum of clinical care management for 25 years with a focus on PHM at large national health plans. Prior to joining our team as the lead PHM analyst, she's been a great addition and has actually hosted the most of these webinars to date. So we've really enjoyed having her with us. This research actually ties directly into the theme of the Convergence Conference we'll be hosting at the Hyatt Regency in Boston this October 4th through 6th. With the dubious honor of being one of the thorniest pain points in provider-payer collaboration, sitting at the start of revenue cycle, prior authorization is a logical starting point to establish greater provider-payer convergence. So you will learn about this and many more topics with 250 other senior healthcare executives that are interested in learning what's shaping the new healthcare business models tied to convergence strategy. Industry leaders such as Dr. John Bolger from Geisinger, Noah Lewis from GE Ventures, Dr. John Hlamka from Beth Israel here in Boston, and Paul Black from Allscripts, along with many others, will take the stage to share their insights on the hurdles and opportunities that will help strategically minded organizations thrive in the evolving value-based care paradigm. To learn more about speaking opportunities and sponsorships, please email me at john3@chilmarkresearch.com. Without further ado, I leave you in the capable hands of Jennifer.
Thank you, John, and thanks everyone for attending. As John said, prior authorization is really gaining such industry-wide attention year over year. The process is so ripe for innovation. It's an opportunity to simplify it, to automate it, and really importantly, to make it a transaction that adds value instead of adds irritation. So that's really what we're hoping to dig out and uncover and enlighten our audience on here today. The agenda we'll cover is, again, why did we even look at this research topic? A lot of talk with providers, hey, as I take on more risk, is it going to go away? Maybe I don't even have to worry about prior auth. Let's just delve into that and put that to bed. And then look at how it can add significant value for providers and payers. What are the challenges? Why is it so tough? And why is it still so painful in 2017? Look at the technology status, the vendors that we highlighted in the report, and provide some recommendations and projections of where this market is going. So if you're in this space, you're pretty familiar with some of the statistics that talk about the fact that 90% of physicians feel that prior authorization sometimes or always affects access to care. The consumers suffer the brunt of it while they wait for procedures or some type of care that has been ordered while the prior authorization process takes place. So it's impacting providers, it's impacting consumers as payers conduct the prior authorization process the way it is today. So again, it stands to reason that if we can improve that process, we can not only reduce the friction, we can generate more value. So what we have going on in the market then is we know that there's rising costs with care, rising cost of procedures, rising cost of specialty medications that are administered under the medical benefit. And so payers, as they're hit with more and more cost pressure to contain these costs, they tend to add to their prior authorization list. So prior authorization lists have grown approximately 20% in the last couple of years. And so there's an opportunity to kind of clean out the old list, the old items on the list, rather than just add new. But if you picture this situation, we're adding more and more requirements. The innovation has been lagging. Providers are participating in more and more value-based care and feel like they don't need the prior authorization process. It's slowing them down. So, of course, it's no wonder that there are calls for reform and the noise is getting louder and louder. So let's just look at the chart for a minute. I want to draw your attention to why is prior authorization so painful right now, is that it's very manual. If you look at claim submission, highly automated. You look at even the exchange of eligibility and benefit verification information, also highly automated. Prior authorization, and this is the way it's measured here, it's generally overstated in many ways, is suffering from heavy, heavy manual burden. And so again, it's just part of the reason why there's so much pain in this portion of the market. So what we were aiming to do as we conducted this research was, we know that providers and payers need to partner together to ensure mutual success in value-based care. But then we hear constantly about the prior authorization friction point. And we know that for every step you take forward, this kind of pulls you back, right? So we wanted to better understand, what was this friction point? How could we work to eliminate it as an industry? And what we uncovered too is, of course, if you embrace a new form of prior auth, it actually creates a differentiator for you in the market, enabling greater success in projecting success in value-based contracts, monitoring your success, managing it throughout the process, and negotiating stronger contracts. So also what we wanted to do was really uncover the vendors who were creating new solutions in this area. We uncovered more and more as we went along. It's a surprising area of the market where there's just this burst of new solutions on the market. They're not yet at scale, but we wanted to understand, how did these vendors approach the problem? What kind of a solution have they developed? Were they all the same? Are they attacking it from a different vantage point? And then, because it affects providers and payers, who has to pay for this solution? The provider, the payer, or both? Or is there some other stakeholder in the industry that's going to help fund these new solutions? And again, looking to see how the market's going to evolve. So definitions, not to spend time on this, but just for anyone not familiar, prior authorization is where you're really, as a provider, seeking approval from the payer for care that's been ordered, for services, procedures, tests, medications, equipment, devices. There could be any of these and all of these on a payer's prior authorization list. That means the provider needs to call and get approval to ensure that the benefit is paid for. In addition, what we're going to mention in this report, just to draw your attention to the last definition, autonomous is what we call it when a provider is ready to conduct that process in-house and not need to rely on the payer to do that. It's when the provider is able to do the self-policing and the self-control and ensure that care that's ordered meets clinical guidelines and evidence-based medicine, and has worked out an arrangement with, again, the payer to not be doing the same process, right? It doesn't help if the provider's doing it and then the payer's doing it. And it's that redundancy in the industry that is another source of pain point. So autonomous is when a provider is truly able to take over and the payer can, again, kind of turn off their redundant process. So today we're going to cover, again, where we see the PA market sitting. Is it even going to go away? Is it here to stay? What's it going to look like? How can we automate even right now to get huge administrative efficiency gains? The industry, again, per that previous chart, has not taken advantage of all the automation that could take place. We're going to look at some of the new solutions that are just starting in the market in end of 2016 through 2017. We're going to look at how some of the gold standards. One is, it's really key, is clinical decision support is really important to integrate at the point of care. It's only when the prior authorization and the clinical decision support come together that you can really ensure that any care ordered is going to be care paid for, which is really important to revenue retention. And of course, what we're going to also project here is that, as John had mentioned in the beginning, when we have convergence and reduced friction with prior authorization, that creates a whole different level of cultural and technology foundation that allows other forms of convergence to take root and really grow. Because again, we know we need convergence and more collaboration with providers and payers for value-based care to move forward and succeed. And so again, we see this as a huge stepping stone. If we can, as an industry, solve the prior auth problem, then it creates a whole nother foundation to grow other forms of partnerships and convergence. So just again to address, for the providers who hope hope that prior auth will go away as you sign up for risk-based contracts. Does that mean, that you're now accountable for all of your own prior auth and you won't have to go through the payer for that? What we saw was that with all the signs in the market, we project it will be at least another 10 years until strong forms of payer utilization management and prior authorization requirements dissipate, and in its place will become this more provider autonomous model where providers assume all the accountability for variation control and have the technology and the infrastructure to be able to do that. So for the time being, we are not saying that prior authorization is going to melt away as a provider signs up for risk-based arrangements. And what led us to that conclusion? There are many trends in the market. One is that we are just not far enough along in the adoption of risk-based arrangements to have payers in any way feel comfortable turning off the business controls that they have in place through the prior authorization requirement. Again, we need far greater downside risk arrangements and depth in those to be able to even see more trending toward autonomous In addition, when we look at the forerunners in the industry, the Geisingers, the Kaisers, the Interim Healthcares, etc., they don't throw away prior authorization. Partners Healthcare, they instead embed it into their solution overall, make it part of their PHM strategy, work to ensure alignment between the provider and the payer arms of their own business, and again, bring it up to a different model, and then it adds value versus creating friction. In addition, the providers are in no way ready at this point to invest all that's needed to be able to take over their own So again, we see this being a slow transition over the next 10 years. And there are other projections and reasons why within the report, and for the sake of time here, I will move on. So prior auth, we talked about, again, that while it's here to stay, it's going to take on a very different form. And that is when it adds value. And so how is it going to morph? It's moving more to the point of care. Too often, prior auth is retrospective. The care is ordered, and it's only hours or days or weeks after the fact that the provider finds out that the authorization is not approved. That is too far removed from the point of care to add value. So if you can move it to the point of care, use technology, integrate it with the physician's workflow within the EHR, integrate it with clinical decision support, it now becomes a valuable tool that helps providers understand when the care that they order falls within a range of what would be compliant with evidence-based medicine. So it's only when it becomes real-time that it really adds value. And of course, it still has to integrate to claims workflows to make sure that it aligns to revenue cycle requirements. And importantly, again, it is when you look at the analytics, real-time analytics, not 2, 3, 4 or more months after the fact. But if you can look at real-time analytics to guide the entire process, you're able to dial up and dial down the amount of prior authorization required of certain providers and within certain contracts, within certain regions, for certain procedures, certain care events, and it becomes a useful tool again because it's real time and it's dynamic as opposed to based on historic information. And really, another thing for providers to look at it as a point of value is when it stays integrated in some manner with the payer, you're able to tap into all the benefit and programs that are available through payers and employers. And I've listed a few examples here. And it's again, when that all comes together, now you have a complete cycle that really informs the optimal clinical decision making. A little bit of time talking about the challenges. And in particular, I want to just point out that these are the challenges within medical prior auth. Because you might think to yourself too, well, with pharmacy prior auth, they've really had that in place for a couple of years. It's embedded in the workflow, the provider orders the medication, it's authorized even before the patient goes to pick it up at the pharmacy. So why is medical so different? We don't have the same financial incentives in the industry across medical, and by that I mean pharmacy benefits from having pharmacy manufacturers with an incentive to enable, fund, and push the prior auth process to make it more streamlined. But in the medical industry, there's so many stakeholders. It's so complex. There are so many criteria sets on the market between all the various payers. There are thousands of different benefit plans. There are so many different source systems across the payers and all the criteria sets and decision support vendors. You also got payers who haven't cooperated to move to one national standard because they see that their prior auth and medical benefit and medical policy is their differentiator in the market. So they're not going to move to just one national standard, again, because their differentiator is to have their own separate policy. In addition, they're afraid that when they're cooperating, that might be seen as some type of antitrust to set the same type of policies. And then we've had, as everyone well aware, right, meaningful use has taken up a lot of oxygen in the room for the EHR vendors to design most of their product roadmap around achieving meaningful use criteria. And so it hasn't left a lot of room left over to solve all the other challenges such as prior auth. But we're seeing more and more EHR vendors become aware of the opportunity to solve some of the pain points and along the way in the continuum of the prior auth process. And historically, again, the distrust created by this has also just stood in the way of providers and payers sitting down at the table and saying, how do we make this better? Right? So it's just a vicious cycle. The paths that we uncovered that the industry is moving, and these are parallel paths, is if we can further automate the process and use technology, reduce the volume, and make our lists of what requires prior auth really smart, that really does deliver ROI, and reduce the volume of providers required. Those are all three different paths the industry, again, is taking at the same time to try to improve this process. In particular, this report looks at some of the solution vendors who are working to automate the process. Within the report, as I mentioned, the vendors, we profile 11 vendors, in particular 10 vendors and partners healthcare, which is, as you know, a health system, delivery system. We look in detail at what solutions have they offered, how does it actually work from a technology standpoint, did they develop it all in-house, or did they work with some partners to develop their solution? And importantly, I mentioned they're not yet at scale. They're very new solutions, some of them. And so we looked at when are they actually available. Some aren't even available till the end of this year. Some have been available for over 6 months. So looking at when do they go GA, and then in particular looking at the product roadmap. And what we uncovered was that nearly every vendor is working on tighter and tighter integration to the EHR within their product roadmap. And the gist of that, again, is that with today's standard EDI, the 278 transaction, that allows providers to initiate a prior auth request automatically through a payer. And if a payer is also set up with an EDI program, they can respond back electronically. But that's just the shell, right? That's just, is prior auth needed? Yes or no? Is it approved? But it doesn't allow any clinical information in the clinical review to get completed. So when a prior auth needs a clinical review, then they have to take it offline, right? It can't be readily done today too easily via EDI, and so that is when the provider and the payer go back to phone calls, faxes, and mail, and work through manual processes to complete the clinical review. So again, by moving it to tighter EHR integration, instead of using the phone to convey clinical information, you can use APIs to pull the information you need right out of the EHR, package that, send it right to the payer. And so we find more and more on the product roadmap is more of that technology integration to the EHR to try to get away from the painful phone calls of convey clinical information. We looked at what customers these vendors have in place right now for their solution. And then by business model, we mean, again, does the payer pay for this solution? Is it funded by the provider? In the case of CoverMyMeds and SureScripts with their pharmacy solutions, the pharmacy manufacturers also help fund the entire electronic prior auth processes. So it's interesting to look at who funds these solutions as each of these different vendors have set up their business models. What we did then, too, is besides providing that description for each of the vendors, you'll find in the report we evaluated them by looking at, first of all, let's group the first two. Automate. Do they automate just the fact that a prior auth does it need completed or not? Or do they actually go one step further and automate those prior auths that require an exchange of clinical information. And so we look at step 1 and we look further deep at step 2 because it's this new automation of clinical reviews that is so new in the industry. Again, that has relied on phone calls and faxing for years and years to get that piece completed. But then we look at not just does it automate those, but who does it automate it for? Does it automate it for the provider or does it automate it for the payer? Does it keep the provider in their workflow or does it integrate to the payer's med management system and keep the payer in their workflow? Or does it do it for both? And then we looked at, again, are they at scale? Are they at a pilot stage? Are they just starting? Have they been doing it for years? How robust is the solution? And again, then who actually pays for the solution itself? And we stacked up the vendors against those criteria. This just takes a high-level view, not to go into detail, but again, you can see in the right-hand column the 11 vendors that are profiled in the report. And just to show you how many different organization types they come from, all the different segments of the industry that are trying to come together to solve this problem, from EHR vendors, clearinghouses, clinical content vendors, again, pharmacy solutions. We have our BPO vendors, our large consulting and technology firms, and then a whole handful of technology startups, and we profile one of those. So it's really an area that I think is so ripe for improvement with so much potential and interest by providers to get this solved that, again, you can see that so many different stakeholders in the industry are trying to get a solution around this. And yet, let's look at the technology. Again, I touched on the fact that the pharmacy industry is a few years ahead of the medical industry, and to understand why, first of all, we know pharmacy benefit management is less complex. You're talking about a limited number of PBMs compared to the hundreds and hundreds of medical health plans. And then in addition, you're talking about the different stakeholders on the medical side. On the medical benefit side, you have everything from hospital admissions, device companies, diagnosis, surgical procedures, all of that needs prior auth. That all has handfuls of different stakeholders, whereas the pharmacy prior auth, you primarily have the pharma manufacturers who are incented to get their medications in the hands of consumers, and that creates a lot more straightforward process. In addition, then, the pharmacy industry, back to that 278 EDI transaction, they looked at that that came out of the 1996 HIPAA law and realized by around 2009, the pharma industry realized that standard isn't going to do what we need it to do. It's not standardized enough on the clinical information that gets passed back and forth. It doesn't set up the right infrastructure to do that. It doesn't allow a dynamic exchange, and it doesn't provide the codified reference to the EHR. So the pharmacy industry, through their standards organization, their NCPDP, developed their own standard. And it's through the use of that standard that, again, the electronic prior auth process is founded on within the pharmacy industry. So the pharmacy industry, for so many different reasons here, again, is operating on a different level than the medical prior auth. So in particular, this report was looking at the medical prior auth and what kind of movement are we seeing in that area against this backdrop of what are they doing in pharmacy that's so different. So in the medical prior auth, again, we have everything from manual solutions to the EDI solution I mentioned, and yet we've got payers with all their various portals where you can enter your prior authorization request into a payer portal, and then we have some of the new solutions on the market. Wide range of time span, and we have, right now the market is spanning all of this. We have over 40% of prior auths have been submitted through separate payer portals. Providers have verbalized that they have up to hundreds and hundreds, 600, 1,000 different logons to all the payer portals for all their providers, and that's how onerous it is to submit requests through the payer portal. So these are very onerous, and again, this is where it's starting to get better as some of the new solutions that are coming out. A word about automation, because every vendor profiled and other solutions that you read about, you're going to see the word automation in prior auth again and again and again. And so what we really dug into was the fact that you have to ask the first question, who does it automate for? For the provider or for the payer or for both. And so what might automate for the provider doesn't automate for the payer, and vice versa. You can see the manual processes, just to draw your attention to a few of these. Phone, fax, and mail creates operational costs, administrative costs for payers and providers alike. That is not the ideal solution. Sure, when payers introduce all their various portals, they each have one. That helps payer automation because it ties to their own workflow, but it doesn't help the provider a whole lot. Makes it a little easier, a little quicker to get a response, but it's still not great automation for a provider. And it's only when you get to some of these new solutions that integrate clinical decision support with the EHR, with the claims workflow, that you truly get automation that benefits both the provider and the payer. So again, it's a be very aware of the word automation, and don't assume a solution that says we're automated is really going to deliver all the value that you're hoping for. So where is the market headed? What we uncovered again is that the most advanced and sophisticated health systems realize that prior auth, if you retool it and you modernize it, you don't use it the way it's carried out and executed today, but this new form of prior auth is actually a tool that you can leverage for value-based care success. As you take on more downside risk, it's in using that process to ensure evidence-based medicine prior to the order that really, again, drives success. And so again, we're talking moving the entire process to the point of care is going to become a new norm. Hearing about retrospective reviews, again, over the next several years will become a thing of the past. At the same time, I mentioned payers have continuously added to their prior auth requirements list. We also see a trend where some payers are bringing their list down, analyzing those procedures that truly generate an ROI and trying to refine their lists or do away with them to some extent to try to tighten the process rather than just adding through acquisitions these lists where honestly, again, research uncovered some payers aren't even sure what's on their own lists. That's how out of control the lists have become. Providers, as they, again, take on more downside risk, as they hold more responsibility for variation control, they will invest in some of these solutions that deliver a return on investment because they so sharply cut down on operating costs that they will pay for themselves, is the proposition here. Because for a provider who has to put 1 or 2 or 3 non-clinical or RN bodies on their prior auth process just to get a stack of prior auth submitted each week, that's high cost, right? High manual cost of time and resources just to attend to the prior auth requirements. And so by automating more and more and more of it, you can take those same human resources that we're spending so much time just in obtaining prior auth and instead put them to use on value-based care initiatives and to have them work more at the top of their license than in just completing this admin work. What we also uncovered was that the CDS vendors have really been at this. They have some of the solutions that have been in the market a little longer. Some of the new prior auth solutions, they have fully realized that it is the integration of the clinical content with the prior auth process that adds the most value. But what we also see is, of course, the EHR vendors realize that any solution has to tie out to the EHR, and so they're very quickly realizing that they have an important stake here too, and are going to come forward with solutions. So expect to see more and more solutions from the EHR vendors in this space. So in summary, what we saw was a hybrid model is emerging where a combination of solutions for prior auth are going to exist in the market at the same time. For a good chunk of the market still over the next couple of years, the payer is going to continue traditional At the same time, providers are going to take on more and more of the responsibility and invest in some of these newer solutions and be able to take on autonomous and own that responsibility. And at that point, the payer is going to realize the provider, through the processes they have set up, that the provider has already done their own prior auth, so to speak, in-house, and then the payer will accept that decision and use that to process the claims. And those are the solutions we're seeing set up in this area. And at the same time, and yet another combination is going to exist in the market where through these solutions, we're able to have real-time analytics instead of historical data, and in real time be able to, again, adjust the prior auth requirements for various health systems and provider groups, and be able to only step in as a payer and require more of a review when a provider or a health system is veering outside of the range of evidence-based medicine. So it's really all of this is going to go on in the market at the same time. The solutions are new, they're not yet at scale. And so it will be interesting to see the speed here. Again, we're projecting at least another 10 years until we move to more of the autonomous complete autonomous In the meantime, what will this look like? Again, because this is such a pain point and it's such an area for opportunity, and so many vendors, back to how many vendor segments are in this space, we do expect to see the process and the technology is rapidly picking up pace in this area. So you will hear about more and more automation and more touchless rates, meaning it didn't have to go to the phone, the fax, the mail, right? It didn't need touch by human hands. It was able to be authorized, so to speak, through technology behind the scenes. While it will increase in touchless, I just want to say it will be, I think, what you can expect to see is that you'll have the reviews that don't even require, the prior auths that don't require clinical review will become touchless more and more. And then you will see certain diagnoses. As they get built into the solutions, the highest frequency diagnosis and procedures will become touchless, and then more and more from there. So it's just going to be a steady evolution as to what is able to be automated. The technology in this space that we saw most often across all of the solutions will be, again, the use of APIs to be able to connect the payer rules with the clinical information in the EHR, to be able to package and send that clinical information to the payer and meet the rules that the payer has set up, the clinical and the business rules. We're still going to use the EDI transaction to create the shell case that a prior auth is being requested. Artificial intelligence we found more and more being used in some of these solutions, and the way that is used is to constantly be scanning which prior auths weren't automated, which ones fell out, which ones, again, were not able to be automated. And if the system can continuously learn and add to the business and clinical rules in the rules engine and be able to match up, again, the automation of the prior auth and package up the right clinical criteria to send to the payer, again, the AI allows the system to continuously learn and be able to update the algorithms and business rules. In addition, natural language processing is key solution requirement in many of the most forward solutions, because that allows, again, the solution to tap into all the unstructured data that's in the EHR, because that is often where that clinical information resides, right? That today it's getting handled over the phone. It's in the EHR somewhere. It's a matter of getting to it. And the analytic solutions then that are provided as part of these solutions really allow a provider group and a payer to keep a much tighter and real-time view into the entire performance of that contract and that provider, that region, that network. You can observe, why is one group utilizing at a different level than another group? What is different in that market? Why is that? How do you get to the root cause to fix an overutilization problem if you aren't seeing it real time, right? Because historic information is not nearly so valuable. And so the analytic solutions are really, really key when you're evaluating for some new prior auth solution. But of course, what is slowing us down that we need to happen that are dependencies to creating more of this seamless provider or prior auth? We still need better standardization, such as the pharmacy industry has done with their own standard. We have an opportunity to create further standards for our 278 and 275 in different EDI transactions that are used in this process. There's still too much variability from payer to payer, provider to provider, clearinghouse to clearinghouse, what information is included in those transactions. Of course, better data interoperability to pull the needed data from the EHR and be able to communicate that over to the payers. Evidence-based medicine, the need for more focused development of additional guidelines for all the nuances of all the various procedures and tests that are on the prior auth lists. And of course, those are all the tools But importantly, right, then the industry works best when there's an incentive in place. And so the incentive is the movement to more value-based care, more risk-based arrangements, and more downside risk is the impetus needed for payers and providers alike to step back and to look at their entire way they're conducting their prior authorization process and realize the time is now to think about an automated solution versus, again, just throwing a few bodies at it. So it's really we believe, projecting from our research, more downside risk arrangements, and you will see more and more of the automated solutions. So as you're evaluating, we'll wrap up by just going through what are some of the recommendations that we picked up on as we conducted our research. This industry and this part of the industry has suffered from what I'd call almost a deer in the headlights. The payer looks at the provider and sometimes looks at the vendors and says, well, I'll build it if you use it. I'll build this transaction, I'll build this portal, I'll build this automated solution, I'll invest in this, but should I do that or are you going to use it? And the other party says, well, I'd use it if you would build it, right? So it's just a catch-22. So it's really a do not wait message. Don't wait for new national standards, new regulations. It's a chance to be proactive and not wait for it to be legislated. Come up with solutions that make sense versus solutions that are responding to some future legislation that potentially could or could not come. Automate what's available in today's solutions rather than waiting for the perfect solution. That is, again, what this prior auth area suffers from, is waiting until there's a magical solution that will solve every pain point before you automate any of it. And so, again, it suffers from the let's keep using the same number of resources to do the same manual work when there are opportunities here and now to automate. Consider the full cost is, again, it ties into the caveat emptor recommendation. Just be wary of claims of automation, claims of how much a solution can shave off your prior authorization costs, because the information presented might only be for a certain percentage of your prior auth. And so just make sure that, for instance, if a vendor says, this will shave off $20 off of every one of your prior authorizations. Maybe they're just talking about a certain sub-segment of the prior auth, maybe the ones that don't require clinical review. And as soon as you bucket them all together, it only shaves $3 off of all your prior auth costs. So really do look at the full cost of the full realm of all your prior auth and dig into the vendor solutions to see what part of prior auth are they really impacting with their proposed solution. Because payers and providers both benefit from some type of automation, again, think about how you come together to negotiate the payment and funding of such solutions. And as I mentioned, the second to the last one there, your EHR vendor and the payer, because at the end of the day, this is still largely an exchange of information. They need to be willing to implement some of the solutions that are in place and available today. And so it's important to continue to encourage them to participate. And again, not just do the circular, I'll build it if you use it. It's let's set an implementation date and do this together in our local market. And again, importantly, I've mentioned several times, do be sure that solutions integrate your clinical decision support with your order and claims workflows, again, to ensure that the evidence-based care aligns to your revenue cycle requirements and truly delivers the greatest value. And with that, I will open it up to questions.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer. That was great. Really appreciate the presentation there. So the first question we have is, can an industry organization like AHIP or AMA drive some level of standardization in prior authorization, or is it still considered too proprietary a process, always a one-off or regional specific / population specific process?
Well, the industry stakeholders there mentioned AHIP and the other one was AMA. They are definitely participating. They and other industry work groups are hard at it. They are meeting regularly. WEDI's another one, CAQH Core. So various industries, stakeholders are all coming together and working on all of this. This, again, is not a new problem. The AMA has come out with several white papers as far back as 2009, 2011, trying to make this better. They sent put out a paper in January of this year alone saying here are our principles for reform. This process needs to get better. And again, I think that's what's driving so much of the new solutions that we see in the market, is that the call for reform is so loud that the solutions are coming forward. And then the second part of that question, is there a national standard way to go? If that was the root of the question.
So it was saying, can they drive a national standard, or will it be more regionally focused? Will it always have to be too specific to be national?
Well, even the use of the word standard, right? There could be a standard of clinical guidelines. We do not see that happening. We do see each provider and each payer needing to adhere to their own clinical guidelines. While there will be some standardization, right? There's a certain clinical standard on how to treat a diabetic, then there are still specialty provider groups and even primary care groups, right, that need to customize their clinical standards to fit their clinical situation and their organization. Within a technology standard, there are, again, these work groups with those stakeholders that are working to more standardize this technology standard, if that makes sense. So the EDI 278 is a standard that isn't terribly standardized, and there's a lot of work going on right now to try to make that more standard as a technology tool. So different standards being solved for.
Okay, so with the vendors that you evaluated in the report, how similar were their solutions?
They were very different, surprisingly different. They vary, and first of all, how they come at it, right? Are they historically, have their clients been payers? Then they see it more from the payer point of view, and their solution comes at it more from that angle. If they more sold to the providers, then their solution has more of that taste to it. Additionally, the solution could include some type of a manual behind the scenes work until the technology is more robust and built. It varied from mobile apps to cloud solutions to integrated solutions that are already integrated in existing tools that providers might have. So it was surprising, the wide range of how the different solutions came at it.
Okay. And what is the number one thing that needs to happen to get these solutions moving faster?
I'd go back to having the right financial incentive, right? So we really have the technology in place as an industry in so many ways. We now have the digitization of records with our electronic health record adoption. We have the APIs that we need. We have the EDI. We've got emerging NLP technology. What we really still lack is the cultural desire as an industry to fix this problem, and that comes with the right financial incentive. And so that's where I'll go back to say we need more downside risk arrangements. Per our research, that is what will really move things forward. When you're on the hook for more financially, you look at your operating costs, you look at your clinical costs as well, right? Your actual med management results, and you go, we can do this better. We can do this better, and that's when it becomes, you build the business case to move to more of an automated solution.
Okay, great. Next is, how do vendors handle the variegated medical necessity rules and supporting documentation for prior auth? Some information is available online, others a black box.
Well, and that is the solutions that we saw. That is where there's a tight partnership with the payers to be able to, it varies from either having particular payers during an implementation share more of their guidelines, and that's part of the implementation process, is that it comes out of the black box and it becomes more visible and into the cloud solution that the vendor's implementing. In some cases, it's setting up the roles engine based on, for example, like a clearinghouse can just look at all the prior auths that pass through and say, this many fall out, and here's why, and this many got approved, and here are the reasons they got approved. And you can start to build your own roles engine for all the payers to understand what gets prior auth and what gets approved. In other cases, it is, again, examples of the payer really coming forward with the solutions. I would say as part of the implementation process is just a big part of it. In some cases, the solution provides the payer even with a tool that they can expose more of their own rules to further increase their own automation. So again, it varies. It varies so from vendor to vendor.
Okay. And the final question as we come to the close of the hour, are there any payers or service types that are more successful than others for the 278?
The national payers have been a little bit better about adopting it. There are still some payers that haven't adopted it at all. The Blues plans, most have adopted it, but not all. I'm not sure if that answers the question. If there's certain, you said service types?
Yeah, payers or service types that are more successful than others.
No, I think again, the 278, once it's used, once it's implemented on the payer side and the provider side, certainly can automate the first part of the prior auth process, which is just saying, is this needed or not? But then as soon as it goes to, does it need clinical review, the 278 alone can't handle that. So for all service types that need clinical review, the 278 just doesn't do it. And that's, again, where these new vendors and their solutions come into play. It's to try to deal with that part of it where the 278 ends, then these new solutions pick up and help address those prior auths that require clinical review.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Jennifer, and thank you everyone that took the time out of their afternoon to attend and be part of this discussion. I look forward to meeting many of you this fall and staying in touch. Have a great week.